Let's talk about one of the heaviest pressures that pastors carry, the pressure of comparison. Maybe you felt it. Maybe you just felt it this past Sunday. You drive by the church down the street, or somebody in your neighborhood tells you about how much they love their church. And you know which one they're talking about. It's the one right around the corner. And you see, the parking lot's overflowing. You hear about their booming youth ministry, or maybe one Sunday you happen to watch their live stream and you think, wow, ours looks like a VHS tape compared to that. And you know what? In that moment, your Sunday, it definitely feels a little less shiny, doesn't it? And you begin to think too, well, obviously it has to be a lot less effective. Here's the thing, though. We all know that the other church isn't the competition. We're not competing with other churches. We preach that to all of our church. We even tell our people that we're all on the same team. But living that out, that's a different story. Comparison, it is very subtle and it creates a heavy weight, but it's kind of a silent weight. And it can crush pastors really under an unnecessary pressure. You know what comparison whispers? It whispers lies. It says things like this, like if you had their crowd, you would be making a real difference. Or if your band sounded like that, people would not be leaving. If your production was sharper, if your lighting was better, if your building was bigger, maybe people would just take you more seriously. Man, I remember this vividly. When I first became a lead pastor, we were 100% portable. Every wire, every cord, I got a call every Sunday afternoon from the custodial engineer who was in charge of making sure that we were out of the building correctly. Every Sunday, something got left. And it was an extension cord. I would have to drive 30 minutes back to this building to pick up the extension cord. I mean, I get it. And even when we moved into a semi-permanent space, it was so interesting. Like, I felt like if we just had a building, we would get more done. We would be better. I felt, and I don't know if you've ever been in portable and felt this, but it was almost like people treated us like we weren't a real church. It's like we were like Pinocchio of church. Like, well, when you get a building, you'll be a real church boy. That's kind of how it felt, you know? And that's all because of comparison. And before you know it, if you find yourself in that trap, before you know it, you're beginning to measure faithfulness by things like attendance charge and Instagram reels instead of by what God has entrusted to you. And this is very dangerous. Not only does it discourage you, but it distorts your mission. It can start leading you to focus on optics instead of obedience. You begin to chase growth for ego instead of for kingdom impact. And here's the pressure underneath all of it. When comparison becomes your scoreboard, you will always lose because someone will always look bigger and louder and shinier. And in today's world, it is not hard to look around. I mean, it's everywhere. Thank you, Internet. So, what's the better way forward? I call this the pastor's paradox. I love teaching this idea for pastors, and I think this is true for everyone, but for pastors especially. We should be content, but not satisfied. That's the paradox. We want to be content, but we want to not be satisfied. Here's what I mean. We want to be content in Christ, right? Paul said it in Philippians that he learned the secret to being content in every situation. So for pastors, that means resting in the assurance that you are not called to be them, to be the other church, be the other pastor. You are called to be faithful with what God has entrusted to you and to be content with every situation, with every attendance number, with every building or lack thereof, with every issue, to be content. However, we also can be not satisfied with things like lost people in our community, with people being stuck on a discipleship journey. See, contentment doesn't mean complacency. Our mission isn't to kind of compete until every person in our community has encountered Jesus. That's, we're not competing, but we are kind of competing, maybe, I guess, against ourselves in that. Like, our mission isn't complete until every person has encountered Jesus. And that's a holy kind of discontentment. And I think that's a version of not being satisfied, and it should drive us. This paradox, you know what it does? It actually relieves a pressure because it can let you breathe again. Like you don't have to carry the burden of being the biggest or the flashiest, or, trying every week to one up yourself, right? That's exhausting. You only have to carry the responsibility of being faithful. So, what does this look like in practice? If you listen to any of these pressure pods, you know I am all about insane practicality. So, what does it look like in practice? Let me give you 3 very simple moves to live and to lead content, but not satisfied. Here's the first one. Love the people you've got. Instead of wishing for a bigger crowd or wishing for the other church's crowd, shepherd yours well. Equip them deeply. Celebrate them often. Like whatever God has given you, steward it. Love those people really, really well. Shepherd them well with intentionality. Number 2, invest in your personal strengths. Like maybe, I don't know your situation. So maybe you don't have a world-class band, but you might have a world-class hospitality culture. I don't know what you have, but you have something that is dynamic and is a strength. Lean into what God has given to you. If you do have the band, lean into that. If you, whatever your thing is, find out what you are great at. What is kind of your, this is a marketplace term, your point of differentiation? What makes you you? Lean into that and stop trying to take a weakness, and this is dangerous, so we'll maybe do a whole nother episode on this, but don't take a weakness and try to turn it into a strength. Now, we don't want a weakness to be so bad that it runs people away, but turning a weakness into a strength can be impossible at times. But leveraging a strength you already have, we can all do that. And then here's the third move. Stay in your lane. You know, the best fruit grows when you water your own garden. You've heard that before, right? So don't try to grow fruit from somebody else's soil. Like stay in your lane. Stay focused on what God has given to you. And here's the win. When you make these 3 moves, when the comparison trap springs again, which it will, you don't have to be caught off guard. You don't even have to get caught at all. You can look down the street and you can cheer them on. Then you can look around your church and recommit to what God has already entrusted to you. Because the scoreboard that really matters most isn't attendance or production polish, it's faithfulness. Faithfulness to the mission of Jesus, faithfulness to the Great Commission in all of the various forms that it shows up. And that's really something no church down the street can ever take from you, your faithfulness to your mission in your context. Listen, I know the pressure of comparison, and I know it's real. I get it. I was a lead pastor for 13 years. I have carried it myself. Let me just give you a quick example of this. When I first became a lead pastor, it was at Watermark Church. They turned in, we got our building one day and we became Woodstock City Church. And by then we were a campus location of North Point Ministries. But in those early days, when I got there in November of 2008, we had a couple of hundred people, $400 in the bank, 100% portable. So much of what we were trying to do was not succeeding. It was a very challenging season for us. And so one of my very first meetings, I got to see a chart. It was an attendance chart, okay? And we called it the bubble chart. Our church was in partnership with North Point. North Point, you may know this, has a bunch of partners all over the world now, partnership churches. They do a great job of this. They call it the Irresistible Church Network now. So back then it was just partners, and we're only 12 partners, 13 partners back then. So we had this chart, and it was a bubble chart. And the bubble was in one of 4 quadrants. And the size of the bubble showed the size of your church. And the location in the quadrants showed if you were growing or declining. Listen, first of all, that's a terrible thing to give to a pastor. But we were a part of this broader network. And it was, I guess somebody thought, good for all of us to see where everybody was. I framed that first bubble chart because our little bubble was so tiny. and it was way down bottom left because that was no growth, no momentum, things are not going well. I looked at that bubble chart for probably 6 years. And we grew. I mean, we started doing really well. We would, we went from 200 to really about 1,000 in a year. And I mean, that's very atypical, I know. And then we became a campus at North Point a year later, and I mean, hit 2,000 almost immediately. And then before we moved into our building, we were in a school still kind of semi-portable with 5,000 people on Sunday, and then we were 8,000 in our building. I mean, and it's easy when you're 8,000 people not to compare anymore. But I will tell you, comparison, it really wreaked havoc in my heart during those early years, looking at that bubble chart. I mean, every morning I would go into my office and it was sitting there on my shelf. And for me, I thought it was a reminder to be tenacious, to work hard. But I don't know what would have happened if we would not have grown. If that bubble chart would have stayed the way it was, would I have been able to be content? I don't know. But I would like to think so, because being content is what we're called to do, but we're not called to be satisfied. So, kind of wrapping up this week, I would love for you to redefine your scoreboard. Maybe just ask yourself, am I being faithful with what God has given me? Or am I chasing what He's given to somebody else? That's really the measure that matters the most. And when you live content but not satisfied, you will lead with more confidence, you'll lead with more clarity and freedom than comparison could ever give you. So be content, but don't be satisfied.